to you live from the press box. So this morning, and first of all, won't be joined by my good friend Mark Karstens. He had a schedule change. You know, you got to remember, even though athletic directors don't work too much during the summer, they still do work a lot during the summer. So we'll try to get Mark on a show later on this summer. But right now, we're going to talk a little bit about, as you saw over the weekend, or maybe it was Thursday or Friday, the 2024 SEC football schedule coming out, because we're going to be adding, of course, Oklahoma and Texas. So we're going to dissect that a little bit and talk about just what does that mean, not only for football, but for other sports in the SEC. And who better to do that with me than my good friend Doug Cook, retired administrator from Satellite High School, past football coach at Cocoa Tigers. Doug, how you doing this morning?
Doing good, Bill. Just finishing up on a ice cream sandwich. I got a shout out to Walmart. I've got the best ice cream sandwiches around, man.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to start looking at some high school football schedules. You know, we did a couple spring games last year, hopefully with 16 high schools that play here in Brevard County. We can sneak in and do a couple regular season games and do something like I tell people, it's just two retired guys and a microphone. That's all we are. And we'll travel anywhere for a game. So well, first of all, and again, I don't want to make this one-sided, but we do have two Gator fans. First we had Gator golf a couple of weeks ago. That was probably one of the most exciting golf championships I've ever seen. How about that Gator baseball team?
Oh, unbelievable game.
My God.
I almost had a heart attack last night.
Well, first they're behind a couple of days ago, and caught up. Now they were way ahead 5-1. And, it's funny when people look at brackets and you've coached a lot more than I have, two sons that played minor league baseball, 5 kids that played in college. It's funny. They look at the bracket and say, well, Florida's got the easiest, bracket because there's not that many ranked teams on that side. Well, we got to remember that's because somebody like Oral Roberts beat those ranked teams. And you can't sell them short, and they proved that last night.
Oh, absolutely. Oral Roberts, first of all, they got God on their side, and you've got that power. You're in good shape, man. I tell you what, Oral Roberts came out to win the ball game.
Oh, no doubt.
Gators, Gators started out really strong, but they kind of became lackadaisical toward the end there, don't you think?
Well, yeah, and let me ask you this, because again, you've been around the diamond a lot more than I have. I never could hit that fastball, so I started playing softball where the ball is like 10 times bigger and it's a little bit brighter yellow. What do you think about Scully forgetting how many times he visited the mound?
Well, I hate to criticize coaches, but that was a big mistake. That could have cost him dearly. I mean, your pitching coach, you got your pitching coach, you got other coaches on staff there, should have realized what was going on. I mean, I know this is exciting. They get caught up in the game and they forget, but man, that's D1 baseball. You got to be on top of your game, especially in the World Series, man.
Well, and you saw the pitcher out there. I saw him mouth, what happened. And I guess in listening to the announcers, he's one of the top 10 All-American relievers in the game. So pretty tough to pull him back. But that's exciting. We got a couple good games today. I'm looking forward to watching LSU and Wake Forest. I know I took some hits on the press box yesterday. I think if Florida and LSU make it, I think Vegas is going to give a little bit of a lean to LSU if they get through that bracket and beat Wake Forest. But again, it's exciting. The Gators are keeping us on the edge of our seats with the last championship of college sports going on right now. So let's talk a little bit about SEC football. So let me ask you this first. What are your thoughts on the SEC expanding? And with that, is Oklahoma and Texas the right teams?
Well, it's college football is big business, So there's a lot of things going on that we don't know anything about. Right. But I think it can only help the SEC. I think it makes it a little more exciting. Bring the guys in and see how they can compete. I mean, two great programs. Right. It can only improve the SEC. But I'm sure there's
Right.
some coaches that don't want those guys in.
Right.
Probably Texas A&M. Alabama, who's sliding a little bit. To
Yeah.
Georgia.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
And I think, and I agree, and I think it does add a lot of excitement. I think the only downside as a fan, whether you're a Florida fan, Alabama, Georgia, whoever, LSU and the SEC, I think the only downside is, you start thinking, okay, how many of us are going to make the playoffs now? Other than that, I'm like you. There was a big article in the Florida Today yesterday about the money that these conferences make. And of course, the Big Ten and SEC are at the top. And I believe for the SEC, the median, and again, I'm going to put on my mathematics hat. When they talk about median, that means half the teams make more, half the teams make less. The median amount that the 14 SEC schools made last year based on TV, et cetera, was $158 million.
Right.
So you're right. I mean, we're talking about big bucks. And I think it probably boils down to, you know what, this is just what's going to be happening the next couple of years, and you either get on the train or get off at the next stop.
That's true.
And we got USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten next year. So I'm like you. The only downside is, as a fan, is there going to be enough room, whether it's football or any other sport. But we also got to remember, starting next year, we're going to expand to 8 teams in the college football playoffs. I think the SEC, could put three teams in there, depending on, how these teams fare. Georgia, Alabama, LSU. Not sure yet what the Gators are going to have. So I'm like you, and Oklahoma and Texas. You're bringing in some big teams. I think the other thing that it does, and you mentioned it earlier, we've taken Missouri, Arkansas, Texas A&M from that conference. Now, every year, are we going to see Texas and Arkansas again? That used to be big. Texas and Texas A&M. So now all of a sudden, is Oklahoma, Alabama going to be an annual rivalry? Now we really got both some old and some new rivalries that I think will add to the excitement of the SEC.
Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift now. With these 2 new teams coming in, head coaches, they're vying for athletes. It's going to be very difficult for some of these coaches to get the quality athletes they have in the past, because these kids will be going to Texas. Texas got a lot of money. Like you said, they make millions of dollars. They're I think they're at the top of the list in money making. So from a business standpoint, it's going to be very difficult for some of these head coaches.
Right.
And as I look down, we haven't talked about it yet, but the SEC, what they're predicted for their season.
Right.
You see the shift in athletes. Like
Right.
Alabama used to be the powerhouse. Now it's Georgia.
Yeah.
Tennessee's coming up. So
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel sorry for these head coaches,
Yeah.
because there's going to be a chopping block
Yeah.
coming up for some of them, I believe.
Yeah. So with that, moving on. So, and I'm not sure if I'm dialed in on this yet. They're going to be moving away from East-West divisions. So now, like some of these other conferences, we're going to have 16 teams, 1 to 16, and the top 2 make the championship. I don't know if I'm dialed into that right now. I kind of like the East-West, because you build those constant games every year. I have to remind myself, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Florida, we don't have South Carolina. We don't have Vanderbilt. Yeah, Vanderbilt, we've won, 30 out of 35, even though they're always a tough team. What do you think about just one division, 1 to 16 instead of East-West?
Yeah, I don't like that idea. I like the 2 divisions. I like the rivalry
Right.
that it causes, and I don't like that format at all.
No, and I like the excitement of, let's talk about Alabama. Whether Alabama beats the brakes off of the Gators or not doesn't matter. But you kind of look forward to, hey, next year we're going to be playing Alabama. We haven't played them in 3 or 4 years. So it kind of brings a little more excitement when you play those other divisional teams that you don't see every year. So it's going to be a little curious how they do that. I do know a lot of people complain that they only did 8 conference games instead of 9. But from what I read, and I think that's going to change, is a lot of teams had already done their non-conference schedules, and they didn't want to disrupt that too much. So that's why they left it at 8. I think it's going to move to 9. How can you have 16 teams and not play? But the other thing that it did too is Texas and Oklahoma, between the two of them, are going to play every team in the SEC. Texas will play 7 of them, and Oklahoma play the other 7. And then everybody else in the SEC is going to play one of those 2. So I kind of like how that worked out.
Yeah, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, it's gonna eliminate some of the gimme games, that Florida, some of the other teams have. So it's going to be a little tougher schedule.
Right. And you bring up a good point. I think the parameters were that out of the other 4 non-conference games, the only requirement that the SEC had is that you have to play one team from one of the Big 5, the Pac, the Big 12, Big 10, or the ACC. And then you could have 3 patsy teams. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But you're right. If you've got, Clemson always playing South Carolina, we've got FSU every year. I don't know if I can blame them for adding, even though we've lost to Georgia Southern and Sanford scored 35 points on us a couple of years ago. I don't know that they have a choice. And it's not just so much win or lose. When you play 8 or 9 games in the SEC, your kids are getting beat up every year, to put them through a couple more games like that. So I think that was one of the reasons why they left it at 8, as far as that goes. So I think you're like me. You've got some schedules put up there. Any games you see that kind of pop out that you're excited about or looking forward to in another year?
Well, I think, you always have your rivalry teams, and, playing Texas or Oklahoma is going to be a test for anybody in the SEC. So I think, just the SEC playing those teams is going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you'll see Florida fans travel a little bit, as far as, going to see those. A couple of things that struck out: Georgia at Alabama in a regular season game. I read it's the 5th time in the last 20 years that they've played. Man, I think we're going to start seeing some opportunities for the championship game being a replay of maybe a regular season game. You got Texas going to A&M. You had mentioned that earlier. That's a big rivalry. Mm-hmm. They're coming back. And something like Tennessee at Oklahoma. You mentioned, we got Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Ole Miss. We got a lot of those second-tier teams that are going to be right at the heels of the Alabama, the Georgias, the LSU. I think it's going to be exciting to see, some of these games we never thought would happen. Again, like Alabama at Oklahoma during the regular season, Tennessee at Oklahoma. As a fan, I'm excited.
Yeah, we talked earlier about, Texas, Oklahoma coming in. It's going to be a total paradigm shift as far as a power structure. We're already seeing it with Georgia.
Right.
Alabama, they're still good. They're very competitive, but we're seeing a power structure shift, and you're really going to see it when Texas and Oklahoma come in as well.
Right.
So I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting for the SEC.
And you bring up a good point. What's interesting is, and you know a lot more about football than I do. Georgia's, of course, won back-to-back, and they've been strong the last 2 or 3 years. And look, I'm going to be the first to admit, even though Florida went to a couple SEC championship games 5 or 6 years ago, that was just because we were in a weak division. As a Gator fan, it was almost like, no, I don't really want to go play Alabama. But how quickly, in the last 3 or 4 years, has Kirby Smart? Yeah, he's only got 2 national champions to whatever Lou's got, 27. I don't know, or Saban, or Nick. Yeah, they've got Georgia right up there. And I think, to me, what made a big difference was they had how many got drafted the year before? Half of them went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then they still come back and win it. So
now what recipe is he using? You
Yeah,
know,
right. Yeah,
Smart, Coach Smart. What recipe is he using that the other coaches in the SEC needs to emulate? I mean, uh, when I coached, I always I had Coach Gerald Odom, Hodgins. I emulated what they did.
right,
As a young coach,
right,
21 years old, coming out of college,
right,
I didn't know what the heck was going on. So I would copy what those guys were doing.
right, right.
So gosh, whatever he's doing, man,
Well,
whatever he's doing is working.
you bring up a good point. I don't know if a lot of viewers, know that, and of course, you know that better than I do. Whether it's at the high school level or college level, a lot of these coaches during the summer get together.
Oh
And
yeah,
it could be coaches and it could be SEC coaches get together and visit one another to see what they're doing. So, we've always said, why recreate the wheel? And I think that's big that, Kirby, correct me if I'm wrong, was an assistant with Saban. So, what a proving ground that was. And I think with the rich history that Georgia's had, and now that they're back up there, probably like what we hope the Gators or Florida State or Miami would, or UCF, is he's keeping a lot of guys in state now, versus no need to go somewhere else. I was looking down here at
that's a
some of
good
the
point.
schedules. I'm looking at Alabama, and I read where they might have the toughest schedule. They go to LSU, they go to Oklahoma, they go to Tennessee, they got Georgia at home. Let me tell you, and this brings up my next point. What if they lose two close games? What if they lose by one at Oklahoma or Tennessee or LSU if they're highly ranked? Maybe beat Georgia, lose a close game to Auburn. I don't know. With expanding to 8 teams, are we going to start seeing 2 lost teams with these big mega conferences that might make the playoffs?
Yeah, you certainly could. That's a good point. Alabama's predicted to be 11-1. I guess their only loss is to Georgia, but they have quarterback questions too, just like we do at Florida.
Right.
So as a football coach, you've got to build your team around your quarterback. If you have a great quarterback, you're going to win. You're going to win some games.
Right. Yeah, and again, like you just said, we're basing this on last year because we got a year in between this year and next. A lot can happen, positive or negative. We talk about the Gators. I don't know if I think we're still a few years away. Whether it's going to be with Napier, he certainly deserves another couple years. And I was telling somebody yesterday, I just don't see that excitement coming out of Coach Napier on the sidelines. And I don't know. I think 19, 20, 21-year-old, 60-year-old guys, we kind of feed off of that. I don't know.
We're used to winning.
Right.
And we have a little bit of arrogance about us as Gator fans. And this year the Gators are predicted to go 5-7 overall and 3-5 in the SEC.
Yeah.
So, as a Gator fan, a lifetime Gator fan,
right.
Out of the womb,
right.
I'm like, come on, dude, help me out.
Well,
but I think the rich donors at Florida, I don't know how patient they're going to be. Now, if we see progress, you've got to plan. He's got a plan. I know Napier's a good coach. He got a plan. He's got to implement that plan,
right,
and stick to it, and hopefully make some progress this year. I wasn't real impressed with his coaching ability last year. I think he had some athletes, especially a great quarterback, but he's going to have to show some progress. I'm still on his side.
Right.
I'm there with him.
Right.
I'm praying that he will win because I get beat up by my Florida State fans,
right,
my friends. So I'm just hoping he wins.
My second year in Gainesville, so now I'm going to age myself. We tied the first game 3-3 against Georgia Tech, and then lost 10 straight. And they used to have,
I remember that.
Yeah, I forgot that I don't think it was the Dunkel Index, but they had a poll of the 10 worst teams in the country, and we were number 1. So I've been there through thick and thin, and I'm like you, and I think we said this about this past season, give me 7 games, maybe 8, win a bowl game, and just use that, because if you want recruits, that's what they got to see.
Yeah, but these bowl games now, the kids are opting out, man. How
Ah,
can you compete if you're star athletes? I mean, I felt bad for Florida. Last year they got destroyed in their bowl game.
yeah,
But like I said, it was NIL, and it's all big business now. It's like the minor league,
right.
it's a minor league now that you're paying these players. So, like we talked earlier, it's a shift in our thinking process. Like you said, Billy, you either get on board or you get off.
Right,
So I'm on board
right,
with NIL.
right,
I don't like it that much, but I'm on board. So
right.
it's a different strategy to win for these head coaches, as far as the transfer portal
Right,
and all this.
right.
So it's interesting how things are evolving.
Well, and we'll come back. I want to do a show on the high school with the new bill coming out. Where now we got, who would have thought we'd ever seen where public school kids can go play at another public school if they don't have that sport.
Right.
I'm going to wait until the FHSAA policy book comes out, hopefully first week of July, so we can actually see how they're implementing it. But, it's going down to all levels. One thing that kind of surprised me is I was looking at the non-conference schedules. I thought these teams scheduled years out. Alabama right now only has 2 non-conference games scheduled in 2 years. And I think it's no, it's not Alabama. There's somebody else. Oh, Oklahoma. They just have Tulane and Temple. I just thought they'd have, but I'm looking down the list, and here's some of the like I say, they have to play 1 Big 5 game out of their other 4. In 2 years, Texas is at Michigan, good game. Alabama, Notre Dame. I'm sorry, A&M, Notre Dame. Bama at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is one of those teams, even if they're got a losing record, you're going up against guys that are 350, 6'7", playing the line.
They're competitive, yeah.
Auburn, California, Georgia, Clemson, Georgia Tech. How about LSU in 2 years? Has to play USC and UCLA, which will be Big Ten teams by then. But I tell you what, you look at Florida. They play Samford, which, again, a second-tier team, even though they scored 35 points on us a couple of years ago. Miami, FSU, UCF. So in 2 years, we're going to play 8 conference games and the Big 3 out of the state of Florida. That's either going to make Billy or break him, in my opinion.
Right, yeah. That's a tough schedule, I don't know what the remedy is for Florida right now.
Yeah,
but I know he's got to win.
And not to change gears, Florida State, I think they're going to have a great year. They got LSU out of the hoop. They got the Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback. Miami, I think he's still building some excitement. And listen, I'm happy for UCF because now whatever banners you're going to put up in that football stadium, you got the opportunity now to earn it, because now you're in a big conference. And I'll be honest with you, with UCF, BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston, even though they're going to be losing Oklahoma and Texas, when you look at other sports, I think the Big 12 is going to be okay with the addition of those, because I think, as you know, now when you're UCF or Houston, now you're going to go out and say, hey, when you recruit, you want to play in the Big 12.
It's going to help. It's going to help UCF, I think. Plus, down here in the South, we have a little more speed than they have up in that area,
Right.
So these teams, they're not real excited about playing Florida.
Right.
Florida teams, because they know, we throw the ball around, we run, it's just not a couple yards in a cloud of dust like they like to play up in that area. Right. So, I think it's exciting time for UCF as well.
Right. Yeah, I do too. So real quick, before we wrap it up, something else I wanted to look at too. We talk a lot about football. You got all these other sports that also Oklahoma and Texas, and the first thing that comes to mind is Oklahoma just won the softball championship. And when you look at gymnastics, Oklahoma won, and I think by 0.15 or something, Florida came in second. So it's not just going to be football. We got a lot of other sports, whether it's softball, baseball, gymnastics. That's going to be tough for the SEC. And I think, as you mentioned, it's going to add some excitement to what we have to offer.
Oh, absolutely. Softball is one of my favorite sports to watch. I love watching those girls. They are, that ball is traveling. I don't. There's some baseball players that couldn't hit that softball, but I think it's so much fun to watch the girls play softball or any sport because girls they just have fun.
Right.
Boys get all uptight and they yell at each other if you make a mistake. Girls are hugging each other and just having fun. But softball is a really really cool sport to watch. But definitely going to add some competition for sure
Right. I
to the SEC teams in all sports. I believe that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one thing we forget about through all this change, and even looking at the Big 12 or Big 10. When you got USC and UCLA, I'll use beach volleyball for example. I don't know how many Big 10 teams have beach volleyball now. I bet you in 5 years most of them will, because
Oh, absolutely.
you're bringing two of the best. I think actually the past 2 years they played each other in the finals.
Mhm.
So I think what's going to be interesting in the next few years is, what's going to happen to the ACC. How deep are they when they come to football? You know me, I'm from Virginia. I'm a big Virginia fan, Virginia Tech as well. Not a lot of big markets in the ACC. Do they need to bring in some teams from bigger markets? ACC's been around for probably close to 100 years. I think it started out as the Southern Conference. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to them. I was thinking the other day, looking at the Big Ten, can you imagine Rutgers and UCLA or USC, talk about a road trip, if they play each other. So I think the Big Ten is going to be fine. SEC, Big 12, I think is going to be fine. Pac-10, I don't know. There's talk now, San Diego State, but I think the Pac-10 and the ACC, they got to be squirming a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right in that regard. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there
with small. All right, young friend, listen, I appreciate you joining me this morning on a happy Monday. We got baseball today. I think 2:00 and 7:00, the other bracket. I think the Wake Forest LSU game is going to be pretty good. We're starting to wane down a little bit in summer sports, but this baseball is certainly keeping us excited. We'll see how the Gators do. It's nice winning those first two games. Thank goodness they're not coming out of the losers bracket like they have in the past 2 weekends.
right.
But we'll get back together in about a few weeks, talk about a little high school and how that HB 225 is going to affect us. Other than that, don't eat too many ice cream sandwiches a day. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
I start my morning out with them, I got to have one in the morning, But I'd like to thank you for your press box overtime information. I'll tell you what, like we talked before, I used to get it from Florida Today, but I don't get the sports. And you've always got some valuable information out there when I get too lazy to Google it myself. And I appreciate it. Now, a lot of my friends too, that I turned on to this
Good
press box overtime thing. I appreciate it as well. So keep up the good work. We appreciate it. I know it's a lot of work on your part, but we appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate you guys making fun. Like I tell, we're small, but we're a good fun group. I had another friend just like you a couple of weeks ago texting me that he was excited. Now he's labeled as the top contributor, just like you and Jimmy and a few other of my friends. So I appreciate everybody being a part of that. And we got more good things coming out this summer. Thanks, Coach. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Appreciate your time today.
All right. See you later. Thank you.
All righty. All right. So that's it from the press box. Happy Monday. A lot of things coming up. We still got a year to dissect what happens with the SEC as we add Oklahoma and Texas. Again, other sports as well. When you talk about gymnastics and baseball and softball, golf, what's going to happen with the other conferences based on this? We know UCLA and USC is going to the Big Ten. A lot of things coming up. Hope to come back in a couple of weeks. We'll talk a little bit about high school and HB 225 and how that's going to affect public schools, especially right here in Brevard County. Got some interviews coming up in a couple of weeks that I'm excited about. So keep on staying tuned to Press Box Overtime. Thanks for your support. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hey, we'll talk to you soon.